Welcome back to the Mad Genius Thesis, where we kind of pick apart that that link between creativity and mental illness. And today we're going deep on Charles Darwin,
Oh, yeah.
the guy who redefined how we see like all of nature. I mean, you'd think a mind like that, a mind that revolutionized science would be, well, brilliant, right?
Right?
But here's the thing.
Yeah.
Darwin himself, he didn't really think so.
It really is kind of ironic when you think about it. I mean, in this questionnaire, one of these self-assessment things, he actually describes his memory as bad.
Oh, wow.
And he considered himself not widely knowledgeable. He even said he had no great quickness of apprehension or wit. And this is Darwin, the man who gave us like the theory of
I
evolution.
mean, that's wild. Where is that from?
Yeah, this is straight from Janet Browne's book, Charles Darwin. You can find it in chapter 13.
Okay, Charles Darwin, chapter 13.
Yeah.
So then it makes you wonder, right? I mean, did his lifelong health struggles, like, did they somehow fuel his scientific breakthroughs? Or were they just these huge hurdles he had to, like, constantly overcome?
Right.
And it's funny because in Browne's biography, she really pushes back against that image of Darwin, as this solitary, reclusive genius.
Yeah, and what's really interesting is that, contrary to that popular image, Darwin was super plugged in. Like, he had this huge social network, scientists, writers, family. He was constantly interacting with all these people.
Oh.
He wasn't isolated at all.
Right.
In fact, like, he really sought out company, especially when he was in London.
Yeah.
And he loved, like, these lively discussions and debates. I mean, he really thrived on that kind of intellectual exchange. Browne talks about this in chapter 9.
So we're already seeing, like, a different side of Darwin here.
Oh, yeah.
But we can't just ignore, what Browne calls the shadow of illness.
Right.
I mean, this thing loomed over him for pretty much his whole adult life.
Yeah. Right.
This wasn't like just a minor inconvenience. This was chronic,
Yeah.
debilitating. I mean, we're talking vomiting, fatigue, anxiety, like the whole 9 yards. And Browne, she goes into detail about all this in chapter 11.
Yeah, and this is where it gets really interesting.
Yeah.
Because you have to ask, like, how did all this impact Darwin's work? I mean, being sick all the time, it forced him into this rigid routine. He had to, like, really prioritize his work, limit social engagements, even though he enjoyed them, and just, like, guard his energy all the time.
I see.
So that probably, I mean, that really contributed to why people saw him as a recluse. It wasn't, like, a choice so much as just, like, a necessity.
Well, so it's almost like his illness, it shaped his working style.
Right.
So then the question is, was this pressure, being sick all the time, was that like a motivating factor? Like, did it push him to do more?
Yeah.
In the face of all these limitations?
It's definitely a question worth thinking about. I mean, did those constraints create like a sense of urgency? Like, did it force him to really focus, like laser focus on his research? And we see that, in how he structured his day.
Yeah.
How he protected his time.
And Browne also mentions that Darwin really leaned on his family, especially his daughter Henrietta. They handled his mail, helped him with his writing. It's like he built this support system around his work, which you can find in chapters 10 and 12 of the biography.
It really, I think it just emphasizes how genius rarely exists in a vacuum.
Right.
Darwin's family, they were like his anchor. They let him, keep going, keep doing this groundbreaking work, even when he was like at his worst health-wise.
Okay, so that brings us to that big, I guess, thorny question.
Yeah.
The mad genius thing.
Right.
Like, is it even right to apply that to Darwin?
I think we have to like be careful here.
Yeah.
It's not about romanticizing mental illness or saying, suffering equals creativity.
Right.
But with Darwin, it's impossible to ignore how closely connected his struggles were to his life and his work.
I mean, think about it. His observations, how meticulous he was, his incredible attention to detail.
Yeah.
And Browne talks about how his world shrunk down to like his home and his garden.
Yeah.
And yet, within those limits, that's where his theories really took off.
Yeah.
So could his lifestyle, like being constrained like that, could that have actually like made him even more focused?
That's where Browne's insights are so valuable. In chapter 13, she talks about Darwin's fascination with his garden, how intensely he observed the plants and animals right there in his own backyard. He found a whole universe to discover just in a few square feet.
Yeah. So his illness maybe shaped like
Yeah.
his style. But what about the actual content of his work, right?
Right.
Like his theories were, I mean, they were radical, groundbreaking.
Yeah.
So could his isolation, like being away from all the conventional thinking, the scientific establishment of the day, could that have like played a role in how he developed his ideas?
It's definitely a really interesting possibility. Did all that time, all that space to just think, did that let him question assumptions that other people, they wouldn't even think to question?
Yeah.
And did the pressure of his own struggles, did that make him like more aware of the struggles for survival in nature?
Yeah.
I think these are things we need to keep exploring as we go deeper into Darwin's life and work.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we can't forget, I mean, Darwin, he was like this compulsive data gatherer.
Well, yeah.
He wasn't just like coming up with theories. He was constantly experimenting, constantly testing his ideas. Chapter 13 in Browne's book, she talks about all the work he did with plants. His obsession with pigeon breeding, even his detailed analysis of facial expressions like across different species.
Yeah, you really start to see a pattern there, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't just a brilliant mind at work. It was this disciplined, almost like obsessive approach to understanding the world.
Yeah.
So it makes you wonder, did his need for control in his own life, all these health challenges he was facing,
Right.
did that somehow translate into his scientific methodology?
It's a fascinating connection, and the thing is, Darwin himself, he kind of downplayed his brilliance. He said his success was more about hard work and focus, not some innate genius.
So was Darwin's genius more about like sheer determination than actual intellectual power?
Yeah, and you can see this in chapter 13 of the biography too.
Okay.
And I think this is where things get really interesting for me, because if we zoom out a little, it makes you question like what genius even is. Is it just raw intellectual power, or like Darwin said, is it more about persistence, about that dogged determination to just keep going, keep asking questions no matter what?
Yeah, it's like he was driven by this insatiable curiosity, this need to understand like the mechanisms of life.
Yeah.
And his illness, instead of like holding him back, it might have actually fueled that drive.
Absolutely. And we can't talk about Darwin without also talking about the world he lived in.
Yeah.
I mean, he wasn't working in a vacuum. This
Right.
was like a time of huge intellectual upheaval.
Right.
It was a period where traditional beliefs were being challenged left and right, and all these new ideas were emerging.
Yeah, you can almost feel the tension of that era, right?
Oh,
the, the clash between the old and the new.
Yeah.
And Darwin's theories landed right in the middle of it all.
Right in the thick of it.
They weren't just a scientific breakthrough. They were like a cultural earthquake.
Yeah.
They challenged these really deeply held religious beliefs.
Right.
And they forced people to rethink like humanity's place in the natural order of things.
Think about it. I mean, before Darwin, the dominant view was that species were fixed, unchanging, created by a divine hand.
Yeah.
Darwin, he completely upended that with the concept of evolution by natural selection.
Yeah.
This idea that species evolve over these vast stretches of time through this struggle for existence.
And he wasn't just like throwing out these radical ideas.
Yeah.
He was backing them up with decades of research.
Years and years of work.
Browne talks about how Darwin spent like years collecting evidence from fossils, from his own observations of plants and animals, even from letters he was getting from naturalists all over the world.
It was incredible.
That's what gave his work its power.
Right. Exactly. It wasn't just speculation. It was grounded in this mountain of evidence.
Right.
And that made it, I mean, really hard to just dismiss, even for the people who really hated his conclusion.
And there were a lot of those, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, his work, it caused a huge uproar.
Oh, yeah. A ton of controversy.
He was up against religious leaders, other scientists, even the press.
It was intense.
I mean, think about it, the audacity to suggest that humans shared a common ancestor with apes.
Yeah.
It was like a complete rejection of how people saw the world.
Yeah, and I think it's crucial to to understand this context.
Yeah.
Browne, she captures this beautifully in her book.
Hmm.
I mean, imagine how radical this was back then. You know, as a modern listener, you probably take evolution for granted.
Right.
But back then, it was truly revolutionary.
Yeah. Browne, she describes this famous confrontation between Darwin supporter Thomas Huxley
Right.
and Bishop Wilberforce at this meeting of the British Association for the Advancement of Science back in 1860.
Yeah.
It's become this legendary clash between science and religion.
Can you picture that scene?
Yeah.
Huxley, you know, fiery and passionate,
Yeah.
defending Darwin's theory against Wilberforce, who is, you know, constantly attacking it and even resorting to personal insults.
Wow.
I mean, it must have felt like the whole future of science was hanging in the balance.
And it's amazing to think that even today,
Yeah.
well over 150 years later,
Right.
Darwin's ideas are still sparking debate and discussion.
Absolutely. And it just shows how powerful his work was. Darwin, he didn't just give us answers.
Right.
He opened up this whole new way of thinking about life on Earth.
Hmm.
He gave us a framework for understanding, you know, the diversity of life, how species are all interconnected, and this ongoing process of evolution that's still shaping our world today.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's mind-blowing when you think about how Darwin's theories, they didn't just stay in, like, you know, scientific circles.
Oh no, not at all.
They spread out into society as a whole.
Yeah, like it was a full-blown Darwinian revolution.
Yeah.
And it's amazing how it went beyond, you know, those academic walls.
Well,
like
right.
his books weren't just stuck in labs and libraries.
Right.
People were reading Darwin. They were debating his work in newspapers, magazines. It even showed up in novels and other literature.
Browne even mentions, like, Darwin's image popping up in cartoons and caricatures.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Talk about, like, permeating pop culture.
I mean, that's a sure sign of how big he'd become.
Yeah.
He was like an icon, you know, celebrated by some, satirized by others,
Right.
and artists were using his image to comment on everything from politics to social customs.
So Darwin, the man, the scientist, he's practically a legend.
Yeah, for sure.
But as you were saying before, his health problems, they never really went away, did they?
No, they were a constant throughout his life, and Browne, she doesn't try to hide that, you know?
Oh.
She gives you this really vivid picture of him being bedridden for weeks at a time.
Wow.
Struggling with nausea, fatigue, and just this whole bunch of other awful symptoms.
I mean, it's almost impossible to imagine how he kept working with all that going on.
I know, right? And yet he just kept going.
Yeah.
Browne, she talks about his incredible determination. His almost like obsessive need to keep pushing forward with his research.
Yeah.
It's like he was terrified of wasting time,
Right.
of letting his illness completely derail the work he felt like he had to do.
So on the one hand, you have this internal battle going on,
Right.
but at the same time, he's still totally engaged with the scientific community.
Yeah, totally.
He's writing letters to colleagues, refining his theories, even publishing new books.
I mean, the amount of work he produced during this time is incredible.
It's amazing.
He published The Variation of Animals and Plants Under Domestication, where he really dives deep into the principles of heredity and variation. And then he tackles this hugely controversial topic, the evolution of humans.
It's Ascent of Man, right?
Yeah, published in 1871.
That must have been another bombshell.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, if the idea of evolution by natural selection was controversial, saying that humans were related to apes.
Yeah, sharing a common ancestor.
I mean, that must have been a huge scandal.
Oh, it definitely was. But once again, Darwin, he approaches this super sensitive subject with a ton of research and these carefully thought out arguments. He explored the similarities between humans and other primates, not just in their anatomy, but also in their behavior and even their emotional expressions.
And then this is where his work on facial expressions comes in, right?
Yeah.
Browne talks about him like analyzing photographs,
Yeah.
comparing human emotions to animal emotions.
And this is where you really see his genius for synthesis.
Yeah.
He was weaving together all these seemingly unrelated fields of study.
Hmm.
I mean, who else would connect like the study of emotions to the whole grand story of evolution?
It's like he was able to see these patterns and connections that everyone else just missed.
Exactly.
So as he gets older, the health problems are still there.
Right.
But Darwin's still like pushing the boundaries. He's still stirring up controversy.
He's still making people really uncomfortable with his ideas.
Yeah. And it wasn't just his scientific work that was controversial.
No, not at all.
Darwin was also a big advocate for social reform.
Yeah.
Especially the abolition of slavery.
Uh-huh.
He saw the basic equality of all humans as a direct result of his evolutionary perspective.
And again, it just shows how Darwin's ideas, they reached far beyond science.
Yeah.
They had these profound social and ethical implications.
So as we wrap up this exploration of Darwin's life and work, I don't know, I feel this sense of awe,
Yeah.
but also humility.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is a man who completely changed how we understand life on Earth.
Right.
And he did it all while dealing with chronic illness and fierce opposition.
Yeah. It's a powerful reminder that genius can take many forms.
It's not always about, being super brilliant or achieving things effortlessly.
No, not at all.
Sometimes it's about quiet determination,
Uh-huh.
about constantly asking questions, searching for answers,
Right.
even when it's really hard and you don't know what you're going to find.
And it's about having the courage to share those discoveries, to invite other people into that search for knowledge, even when it means, facing controversy and challenging beliefs that people hold dear.
Darwin's life and his work, they're a testament to the power of curiosity,
Yeah.
the importance of evidence-based inquiry,
Absolutely.
and the lasting impact of ideas that dare to change how we see the world.
That's a great way to put it.
It's been amazing, exploring the life of this incredible person.
It really has.
From his early days collecting beetles to his revolutionary work that changed how we understand life itself.
Yeah.
Charles Darwin left behind a legacy that continues to inspire us and challenge us to this day.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the Mad Genius Thesis.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
We'll be back next week with another fascinating look at the intersection of creativity and the human mind.